let's build ALUCARD from Castlevania in Dungeons & Dragons, because apparently there's a bit of a trend when it comes to just spelling things backwards, whether it's Ekans from Pokemon actually just being Snake, or Alucard being Dracula spelled backwards. But I definitely wanted to do a build that's focused on his ability to teleport, his very solid sword fighting, the fact that he's basically just a vampire, and I wanted some shape-shifting in there, and I kind of love the moment in the Netflix show when he turns into a wolf and is still wielding his sword, so I wanted to make sure I could do that, just like you're a giant wolf from Dark Souls. And if you want character sheets to follow along, they're linked down below, as well as our new free newsletter, which also comes with some other free goodies. But let's dive in, starting with the species, and we're going to go with the Dhampir. This comes from Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft. It is a bit faster than most other species, having a walking speed of 35 feet. It has the feature Deathless Nature, so you don't need to breathe. Spider Climb, so you have a climbing speed equal to your walking speed, and at 3rd level of this overall build, you can actually move up and down and across vertical surfaces and upside down along ceilings if you need to, all while still having your hands free. But of course, you're a Dhampir, which is basically a vampire, and you get the feature Vampiric Bite. So your Fanged Bite counts as a simple melee weapon, and you can add your Constitution modifier instead of your Strength modifier for it. When you bite somebody with it, it deals 1d4 piercing damage, and you can do this a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus, and when you do so, you can either regain some hit points equal to the damage you deal, or you can gain a bonus to your next ability check or attack roll. Then when it comes to a background, I wanted to actually lean more into what would benefit the character most rather than a more fitting background, because I would go with Noble, but the ability scores don't line up and I don't really like the feat that goes with it. However, the Wayfarer background could be argued that it works as well, because Alucard's mother was killed for being accused of being a witch, and being a Wayfarer is more about being an ill-fated cast-off. This gives us proficiency in stealth, and we can choose acrobatics for our other skill. It gives us the lucky feat, so we have a number of luck points equal to our proficiency bonus, which we can use to give ourselves advantage or give somebody else disadvantage, and we get some ability scores that line up pretty well with what I need for this build, because we're going to have a point spread that looks like this, really hammering in on the wisdom and charisma, which is going to be very useful for this build. Then choosing a starting class was a bit tricky, because I was tempted to go with something like a ranger, because despite basically just wearing his coat most of the time or being bare-chested in the Netflix show, in the Castlevania video games, he is wearing armor a significant amount of the time. However, he does have a weapon that he can summon to his hand at will, and there's only 2 classes that work really well with that. So we're going to go with a Warlock, and we're going to think of any of our Warlock abilities that we inherited from Dracula as being some sort of gift from a creature that we didn't really want, which fits pretty well with a Warlock. When you become a Warlock, you get Eldritch Invocations right away, and we're going to choose Pact of the Blade so that way we do have a weapon that we can summon into existence, and very importantly, the Pact of the Blade update in 2024 is that you can now use your Charisma modifier for the attack and damage rolls, but you can still use Strength or Dexterity if you wanted to. On top of that, your weapon automatically will deal necrotic, psychic, or radiant damage instead of its normal damage if you want to, and you automatically have proficiency with this weapon no matter what. The only downside here is that we don't have the ability to command it to fly around like it happens so often in the Netflix Castlevania show. However, instead of wasting a ton of time and energy trying to make that happen, it's more about the magic sword itself. And the best way to do that is by getting a dancing sword, which appeared in 5th edition. A dancing sword allows you to use your bonus action to command the sword to hover, fly around, and do attacks. Also at 1st level of being a Warlock, you get some spell casting. So let's jump into every cantrip and 1st level spell that you want to be able to grab. The only cantrips you really want are Blade Ward for a bit more defense, Eldritch Blast to recreate some of your dark magic utilizing your Tetra Spirit ability, because that allows you to summon more beams into existence like the Tetra Spirit can do, and then Green Flame Blade to cover your sword in a bit of fire because you need a bit more Hell Flame. There's only 3 1st level spells I would try to focus on, one being Armor of Agathis because it's an absolutely awesome spell that gives you a bunch of temporary hit points and hurts anybody that's going to try and damage you, Hellish Rebuke for a bit more Hell Flame to damage anybody that attacks you again, and then we definitely want Hex just to boost up our damage a bit. Now I want to call something out very early on. We are using the 2024 version of Warlock. This is going to be very helpful for some other things that I want to make sure work in this build, but it does take away one major Eldritch invocation I wish still existed in 2024, because one of the most notable abilities that ALUCARD has is being able to teleport behind a creature and slash at them. There happens to be an Eldritch invocation that you could have grabbed at 7th level of the older version of Warlock called Relentless Hex. This would have been absolutely perfect because it allowed you to use your bonus action to magically teleport up to 30 feet to an unoccupied space you can see within 5 feet of a creature that's targeted by your hex. However, we chose the 2024 version of Warlock, so we don't have that option. I'm a little salty about this, but we'll have other ways to make it work. 2nd level of Warlock gives us Magical Cunning because Warlocks only get a couple spell slots, but they're always cast at their max level. They make up for the limited spell slots by allowing you to recharge them on a short rest instead of a long rest, but you can get even more use out of them with this Magical Cunning. So you can spend 1 minute to regain expended packed magic spell slots, but no more than half of the maximum rounded up. And you can only use this Magical Cunning once per long rest. Also at 2nd level of Warlock, you get 2 more Eldritch invocations. So to make sure you can disguise yourself a bit more easily, we're going to grab Mask of Many Faces, which allows you to use Disguise Self at will without expending a spell slot. And ALUCARD has the ability to use relic cards in the game, allowing him to summon creatures to help him out. And part of the reason that I wanted to go with the 2024 version of Warlock is because you can get another Pact boon, as it was called in 2014, not being just limited to Pact of the Blade. So we're going to grab Pact of the Chain as well, which allows you to summon familiars without using any sort of component or spell slot. So you can summon a sprite, a pseudo-dragon, a skeleton, or even a little demonic imp, all of which are creatures that ALUCARD could summon with his relic cards. Then at 3rd level of Warlock, you get to choose a Warlock subclass. And Warlocks don't really get the ability to wear anything that is basically metal armor. However, we can solve that by choosing the Warlock subclass Hexblade from Xanathar's Guide to Everything. This isn't quite as impactful as it used to be because of the bonuses you get from the new Pact of the Blade, but there's still plenty of benefits to it. First, you get the feature Hex Warrior. So you can actually use shields, which ALUCARD could use a shield. You get access to medium armor, which is very helpful for using some sort of metal armor that is a bit more fitting to things you wear in the game. And you don't actually have to use a packed weapon. You can still tie yourself to a weapon and use your charisma modifier for the attack and damage rolls. But we're still going to be sticking with packed weapon most of the time. You also get the feature Hexblade's Curse. So as a bonus action, you can choose one creature you can see within 30 feet of you. The target is cursed for 1 minute, and you gain bonus to the damage rolls against the cursed target equal to your proficiency bonus. Any attack rolls you make against the creature critically hit on a 19 or a 20 instead of just a 20, and if the cursed target dies, you regain hit points equal to your Warlock level plus your charisma modifier. But you can only use this entire curse once per short or long rest. Then the last thing worth noting is that being a Hexblade expands your spell list, and that's especially helpful because you get access to 2nd level spells once you hit 3rd level in Warlock. So we'll make sure to grab one 1st level spell, which we get access to from being a Hexblade, just grabbing Shield really quickly, boosting up our armor class by +5 if we really need to. Then we need to be able to teleport behind somebody, so we're going to grab Misty Step. And if you want to make sure you can summon one more sword into existence, grab Shadow Blade. 4th level of Warlock gives us an ability score improvement, so we're going to go ahead and put 1 point into Charisma and Wisdom, rounding them both out, because thanks to having medium armor access, we don't need anything else in Dexterity. 5th level of Warlock gives us access to 3rd level spells, so to make sure you can fly around, we're going to grab the spell Fly. We also want to make sure we grab Gaseous Form, because you do have the ability to shapeshift into a mist cloud. And we're going to get more into the shapeshifting later, but I want to get through all of our Warlock stuff first, so it's a little easier to break up. Then we're also going to grab Spirit Shroud, which allows us to boost up our damage pretty considerably whenever we're doing any melee attacks. And we're going to grab Vampiric Touch, for obvious reasons. We get to choose 2 more Eldritch Invocations at this level, so we're going to grab Eldritch Smite to hit much harder with your Rapier, and Thirsting Blade, so you can attack twice per turn. 6th level of being a Hexblade Warlock allows you to take a soul of a person that you slay and temporarily bind it to your service. It counts as a specter, and it can actually fight alongside you or help you out in various ways. 7th level of Warlock gives you access to 4th level spells, but we don't really have anything that really makes sense for the character, but we do get one more Eldritch Invocation, and it's kind of iconic for ALUCARD to float around, so we're going to grab Ascendant Step. This allows you to cast Levitate on yourself at will without expending a spell slot. 8th level of Warlock gives us another ability score improvement, so we're going to go ahead and boost up our Charisma again. 9th level of Warlock gives us another Eldritch Invocation, so we're going to grab Life Drinker. Because you're a Dhampir, that kind of just makes sense, but this also requires Pact of the Blade, and so once per turn when you hit a creature with your Pact weapon, you can deal an extra 1d6 necrotic, psychic, or radiant damage, and if you want, you can expend one of your hit dice and regain a number of hit points equal to whatever you roll plus your Constitution modifier. 9th level also gives you Contact Patron, in case you ever want to reach out to Dad. And finally, 9th level also gets you 5th level spell slots. So the only one we really want to grab is Far Step, so you can constantly teleport behind creatures much more easily. It's basically Misty Step, but you're allowed to concentrate on it and do it repeatedly. 10th level of Warlock gives us another feature from being a Hexblade called Armor of Hexes. So if the target cursed by your Hexblade's curse tried to hit you with an attack roll, you have a 50% chance to make it just miss you no matter what they roll, even if they crit. 11th level of Warlock gives you a Mystic Arcanum, which is a 6th level spell that you can only cast once per day, instead of all of the other Warlock stuff which recharges on a short rest or using your Magical Cunning. So there is a moment when we see Alucard basically sprout wings from his cloak, and in order to recreate that, along with getting a few other benefits, we're going to grab the spell Tasha's Otherworldly Guise. This makes you immune to fire and poison damage or radiant and necrotic damage. It makes you immune to the poison condition or the charmed condition, and it grants you spectral wings that sprout out from your back, giving you a flying speed equal to 40 feet, while at the same time boosting your armor class by +2. It has a few other benefits, but those don't really matter because we get them from other sources. Then at 12th level of Warlock, we get another Eldritch Invocation, so we're going to grab Devouring Blade. So now you have an additional extra attack whenever using your Pact of the Blade weapon, allowing you to attack 3 times in a single turn. Then the last thing, at 12th level of Warlock, we get another ability score improvement, so let's go ahead and max out that Charisma, because it's going to be one of the most important stats we have. Now it's time for a multi-class, and you can do this multi-class basically at any point, but I wanted to go ahead and split it up a little more nicely. So let's go ahead and multi-class into Druid. Becoming a Druid gives us some spell casting, but all of the spell casting we get here is focused on our Wisdom modifier instead of our Charisma, so we have to keep that in mind. We're going to use our Druid stuff to get a bit more access to our Hell Flame. So we're going to grab Control Flames, Create Bonfire, and thanks to having the Magician Primal Order, we'll also grab Produce Flame. But since you're from the Castlevania universe, it's kind of iconic that a whip is associated with Castlevania, so we're also going to grab the cantrip Thorn Whip. When it comes to some first level spells, we're mostly focused on boosting you up or healing you. So we're going to grab Cure Wounds for some self-healing, Fairy Fire to allow you to have advantage on a whole bunch of creatures, and then to boost up your physical abilities, we're going to grab Jump, allowing you to jump 30 feet by spending just 10 feet of movement, and Long Strider, boosting up your movement speed by 10 feet. Then at 2nd level of being a Druid, we get access to Wild Shape. And this is kind of something I just really wanted. Wild Shape will allow you to shapeshift into a number of different types of beasts. At level 2 of being a Druid, you can only transform into a maximum challenge rating of 1/4, and you can't have a flying speed. But we have the Fly spell, so it doesn't really matter if the creature we turn into can fly. When you get to 4th level in Druid, you can turn into a challenge rating 1/2 creature, and at 8th level of Druid, you can turn into a challenge rating 1 creature, and you can actually utilize the flying speed. When you turn into a shapeshifted creature, you actually get a number of temporary hit points equal to your Druid level, and that is your new hit points for being in your wild-shaped form. That's a big change in the 2024 version, along with actually being able to have your same personality, memories, and the ability to speak, which was very annoying to try and get around in older versions. The other very important thing worth noting here is that your game statistics are replaced by the beast stat block, but only the physical portion, because you get to retain your intelligence, wisdom, and most importantly, your charisma score. Because remember, your Pact of the Blade ability allows you to summon your sword into existence and use your charisma modifier for it. So it would kind of suck if you could turn into a wolf but still not wield the sword that you were so used to using so often. Now I should note you can't spell cast while in this form, but if you already have a spell active, you can still utilize the spell because it doesn't break your concentration or interfere with any spells that you've already cast. The only thing that is a little more complicated is that your ability to handle objects is determined by your form's limbs rather than your own. And somebody may try and argue that it's hard to use a sword while being a wolf, but you are automatically granted proficiency in it because of Pact of the Blade, and you can definitely hold one in your mouth. It's just hard to do it when you're in bat form. And you can actually turn into a swarm of bats, which is a challenge rating 1/4, or a single bat, which is a challenge rating 0. You can't fly at this level, but that's okay because you have the fly spell if you still want to be able to turn into some bats. And if you want to go into your wolf form, a wolf is a challenge rating 1/4. But if you wait until getting at least 8 levels in Druid, which we will get there, you can turn into a dire wolf, which is a large beast, basically being straight up the giant wolf from Dark Souls. Or if you like to be more of a classically white wolf, you can choose a young winter wolf. And one of the best things about choosing a wolf, a dire wolf or a young winter wolf, is that they have the feature pack tactics. So if you have any ally within 5 feet of a creature you're attacking, you have advantage on the attacks. And thanks to all of this stuff from being a warlock, you can swing with a sword 3 times that you're wielding in your mouth. Each one of those can get boosted damage with your Hexblade's Curse or your Spirit Shroud or Hex active. You're using your Charisma modifier for all of those attacks, which is already maxed out. And if your Hexblade's Curse is active, you're critting on a 19 or a 20, which you already have advantage on the attacks with Pack Tactics. Just because I wanted a ridiculous build where I could sword fight as a wolf. Then at 3rd level of Druid, you get to choose a Druid subclass. And I wanted to make sure we got a bit more access to Hellfire. So we're going to choose the Circle of the Land. When we choose a Circle of the Land, every time you finish a long rest, you can choose a type of land to associate yourself with. But we're mostly going to be focusing on arid land. This gives you a bunch of spells automatically prepared, most of them relating to fire. So just at this 3rd level, you get Blur, Burning Hands, and Firebolt. You also get the feature Land's Aid from choosing this subclass, so you can expend one of your wild shape forms to do some healing or damage, but we don't really care about that very much. We want to be able to turn into a giant wolf. Also at this level, you get access to 2nd level spells from being a druid, so we're just going to make sure we have one more type of sword weapon and grab Flame Blade, which is a nice magical fiery sword we can summon into existence while using our wisdom modifier for the attack and damage rolls. 4th level of Druid gives us an ability score improvement, so I would actually grab Warcaster here, mostly so we can make sure we have advantage on Constitution saving throws to maintain concentration on spells, but it also gives us the feature Reactive Spell, so when a creature provokes an opportunity attack from you, you can take your reaction to cast a spell that targets just that creature using that spell as an opportunity attack, which we're mostly going to use for things like Thorn Whip to make sure they don't get away, or Vampiric Touch to just use our vampiric stuff. This also allows us to boost up our wisdom score by 1 point, mostly because I know how this build is going to end, and I don't want an odd score in any of our meaningful ability scores. 5th level of Druid gives us Wild Resurgence, so once on each of your turns, if you have no uses of your wild shape left, you can give yourself 1 by expending one of your spell slots, without even requiring any sort of action. In addition, you can spend one of your wild shapes to give yourself a level 1 spell slot, but you can't do so again until you finish a long rest. Also at this level, you get access to 3rd level spells. And just to get a bit more Hellflame, we'll grab Elemental Weapon. But also, we can't forget about the fact that because you chose the arid land, you get access to Fireball, which is probably the most hellfiriest hellfire spell we can grab right now. 6th level of Druid gives us Natural Recovery, so you can cast one of the level 1 or above spells that you have prepared from your Circle Spells feature without expending a spell slot, but you can only do this once per long rest. In addition, when you finish a short rest, you can choose an expended spell slot to recover, but this total amount of spell slots you recover can only equal half of your Druid level. 7th level of Druid gives us access to 4th level spells, so to have a bit more Hellfire, we'll grab Fire Shield and Wall of Fire, and then to make sure we can move around a bit better, we'll grab Freedom of Movement. We also get the feature Elemental Elemental Fury, allowing us to focus more on our melee attacking or our spell casting, but we use our sword more often than anything else, so we get to choose Primal Strike. So once on each of your turns, when you hit a creature with a weapon or one of your beast forms attacks while in wild shape, you can cause the target to take an extra 1d8 cold, fire, lightning, or thunder damage. But we're going to be sticking to that Hellfire and just doing plenty more fire damage. Finally, at 8th level of Druid, we hit max level, allowing us to choose an ability score improvement, and we get to choose an epic boon because of our overall level. And I want to make sure we can teleport behind people as much as humanly possible. So we're going to grab the boon of dimensional travel. This allows us to boost up an ability score by 1 point, so we're going to go ahead and round out that wisdom, and we get the feature Blink Steps. So immediately after you take the attack action or a magic action on your turn, you can teleport up to 30 feet to an unoccupied space you can see. This does not require you to take a bonus action, so if you want to attack somebody, teleport, take a bonus action to teleport again with Misty Step or Far Step, you can do all of that. I really like the ability to use our charisma to attack with a sword and still be able to have max charisma and utilize that while in wild shape form to be a giant wolf attacking with a sword. It just felt fun. So I'm very happy with the overall outcome of this build, building ALUCARD from Castlevania in D&D. If you made it all the way here, I hope you roll 3 nat 20s in your next D&D session.